And welcome on stage, my feature film friends. Please come up. And you should take mics over on the over there. So next to me, I have Rikke Ennis from Trust Nordisk, and then Nikolaj Nikitin from the Berlinale, and Elena Pollacchi from the Venice International Film Festival. Let's start with you, Nikki. Nikolaj Nikitin certainly keeps busy. He's the Berlin Film Festival's delegate for Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Caucasus, and Finland. So he's always traveling to distant places, and he's involved in several other European film festivals. He's a consultant, a lecturer, a moderator, and you initiated the workshop SOFA, School of Film Agents in Poland. You know almost everyone in the international film industry, and you're also trying to learn some Swedish. Welcome.
Tack så mycket.
So, all our guests today chose some clips that they will show you, and do you want to say anything before we run your clips?
Not really, just enjoy them. I brought 3 clips to 3 films that basically we presented within the last 2-year framework of the main competition in Berlin, and some of that got important prizes and did a big career afterwards. So maybe you just look at them, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the backstories, how it all happened, and maybe a little bit also about my work, my position, and a little bit about my brain looking at new films and what they do to it. So maybe just roll the clips. Yeah. Enjoy. Just to get a feeling, who in the audience besides Freddie saw all 3 films? Can you raise your hand? Who saw 2 films? Oh, very good. Who saw one of the films? Okay.
One of them, actually, Child's Pose, has had a theatrical release in Sweden under the title Cornelias kärlek. Okay.
So, why those 3 films? As you saw, I like this way, very American-made trailering. In UI I wrote about the first trailer that is like one of the best presentation of a heavy art house film ever done in this short form. So this film, let's talk about the first one, Aferim, by a young director from Romania, a black and white 19th century story. You might think, oh wow, this is like heavy stuff. What's so special about this film? This film basically reflects what, say, me and many of my colleagues, so-called curators, film programmers, are looking for when they look at a film, and it's something very perplex and very confusing for ourselves, so it will be even more confusing for you, maybe some of the things I'm saying, because whenever I see a film, on one side I want to see something completely new in it, something innovative, something striking, you know, we always talk about discovering like new talents, and at the same time, of course, I want to see something that I recognize, I want to see some reference to film history. So my view maybe on film as an art form is very much compared to what the avant-garde did. I'm sure you're aware with that fact, the Russian avant-garde in the 20s, which was always positioning themselves, saying that they want to, you know, like turn down all the old and create something new, something that's never been there before. But of course, at the same time, they were always saying how much respect they have for the old masters. And just a short reference into art history without boring you, for me probably the most important artwork of the 20th century, and an artwork, let's say, which we all start working with, is of course the Black Square of Malevich, which is basically opening up the black square for all imagination that can be projected in it. So what does this kind of thinking from my side means to you guys and girls who will produce films, who will direct films? And looking at the example, staying with Afrim, what's so special about Afrim? It's reflecting in a way the own history. It's telling about a very important issue about the whole Sinti Roma situation in the 19th, 20th century, even in Romania and this part of the world. My short pitch to my colleagues in Berlin, it was like the European version of 12 Years a Slave, because this is, you know, like very precise. They understand what it's about. So it's something very connected to the country it comes from. So it has a lot of so-called local flavor, because when we have all this saying, we see cinema, you know, like as a window into the world. So of course we want to see something that is connected only to that country. But at the same time, it has to be understandable for a world audience. So we sell more than 500,000 tickets in Berlin to people from all over the place. We have this big queue. So we are in a very interesting geographical task, I would say, because we have people from North, even South Korea, we have people from all over Asia, Latin America, looking at movies from the completely different part of the world. So we have also to bear in mind that it should be something unique, something local. At the same time, it must be, let's say, understandable for a world audience. And this is, of course, a very thin red line, because this is, let's say, how we often also talk about films. There's this typical saying, will this film work in the competition? Will it stand the pressure? And basically that means, is that film decoded enough that people from other cultures will understand it? Coming to the second example, Child Pose, it was not only in the competition in Berlin, actually it got the Golden Bear, so our most important award, which I would say is together with the Palme d'Or, with our colleagues in Cannes, and probably the Oscar, one of the 3 most important awards. And also this film, in a way, it's very local, because the main issue of the film is corruption, and probably you read the newspaper and keep reading Eastern Europe, corruption still exists there, no matter what other people are saying, it's there. It's a big issue, and it's a big issue, of course, for the young generation growing up, because they have always a feeling that they will be blocked, you know, like from making a career, for being part of the social system, if they don't follow the, you know, like the old roads. So in this film, there's a very strong conflict, and going back also even further in culture, of course, all films are about strong context. Nothing happened and changed since Aristoteles said the very basic thing. We need heroes who need to go out there to do their challenge. And here it's a very personal story, because this is like information you get once you see the film and you start reading up on it, but you somehow feel it just watching the film, that actually the story depicted in the film happened to the director, and the person who is so fantastic in the film playing his mother, that is basically based on her his own mother. So he was living through it. That's why the film is so precise, and basically this clash of generation, the old system of the mother represented trying to solve all the issues with corruption, and then a new generation who's basically saying, okay, I don't want to accept it, I'd rather go to prison than to be part of this old system. So this is Romania. Romania is very fascinating. I picked on purpose 2 Romanian films, because whenever
We'll actually get back to the Romanian question in a while, because it's a really interesting case for us in Sweden to listen to.
Okay, so we do Romania later. So briefly to the last film from Poland, In the Name of. Also there, you saw you got what it's about. It's about a priest who goes to the countryside because he got, let's say, put there because he has had homosexual tendencies, to put it maybe mildly. And probably, as all of you know, Poland is still one of the most Catholic countries around. So this film is done by a female filmmaker, basically saying that priests of the Catholic Church are homosexual. You cannot imagine how afraid the director was when we were talking about this film, and how much I had to protect, and this is like her own words, not me, protect her ass, try to put this film into Berlin competition just to cover her, because without a big festival, she would be seriously slaughtered back home for daring to do this kind of topic. I mean, we had a similar film this year in Berlin, El Club, completely different part of the world, very similar issues. So this is, of course, the kind of film when we see it, we're like, wow, This is so brave. This is a young filmmaker trying to tackle a social issue which everybody is aware of, but the country just doesn't want to talk about it. And whose obligation, if not ours as a festival, is basically to show it, to promote it. It was awarded the Teddy, which is the most important gay lesbian film prize in the world. And really thanks to the festival and the success, it got distribution in Poland. We're not talking about selling it all around the world. Basically, without us, probably the film wouldn't have even been released in the country of origin, because everybody would say, no, 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 this is too hard. We are not touching this. What is it? This is weird. So just these 3 films, and an example, what kind of films work in Berlin as a festival. We are also considered to be one of the 3 big festivals, together with Venice and Cannes, let's say the most political one. I just want to explain what do we mean when we talk about political films and political issue. It doesn't mean that we want to see documentaries on, let's say, any political things, of the fall of the wall, of, you know, like any politician or anything. Political filmmaking means, for me, that it's a director who basically has a vision on life and who's reflecting especially what's going on in his country. For me nowadays it's almost impossible, especially if you come from countries that have issues, to do a film that is not political, because the moment basically you reflect reality, you are reacting what's going on. And in my eyes, the most interesting films, and this is the films basically we're looking for, are done by filmmakers who have the urge to use cinema to express their feeling and their, let's say, negative feeling to what's going on in their country, and they're using cinema as an art form to do this. And the nice thing, talking like this, it doesn't always mean that it has to do a heavy drama, that it must be, you know, like very depressive. It can also be done in a very nice, funny, even comedical way. And if we think back about the film history, we still always talk about Lubitsch and Wilder, about all those cruel comedies, which were basically nothing else than reacting to the Hays Code, which was like a very thorough and tough system back then in the US. So in a nutshell, this is basically the kind of films we look for, the kind of positions we look for, and the only recipe I think I can give, because usually I don't like to give out awards. There's of course one magic recipe, Pia, and I'm very much willing to share it. There's like one word. If you follow it, you will succeed, and it's work, work, and work.
So voila, audience. Work. Thank you, Nikki. That's really interesting. We'll touch upon many of those topics later on. Elena Pollacchi spends most of her time in Asia, Italy, and Sweden. She's a programmer of the Venice International Film Festival with a special responsibility for Chinese language, South Korean, and Scandinavian films. She's a scholar and expert in Chinese cinema, and she's also employed by the Stockholm University. And her Swedish is actually even better than Nikki's.
I don't dare to enter this competition, so maybe I keep it for next time, or I can take it in Chinese. No. Anyway, well, thank you for this kind introduction, and maybe you feel probably now a bit displaced with this idea of having Italy, Sweden, and Asia all connected. But I think it's actually a good way to enter what Nikki has just pointed out, this issue of being local at the same time being global, which is something that inevitably not only the films but also the festivals have to face as part of our cultural, economic and political dynamics. In fact, if I just may add one line to my activities and my position in this world of film festivals and scholarly research, I'm also part of a group of studies who actually study film festivals, which makes it even more interesting to be here today, to not only to share some comments and some secret recipes about the winning film at our festivals or at different festivals, but also to understand how the festivals share similar dynamics while keeping their own identity. So before showing the two clips that I've suggested, I would simply point out to probably one of the major differences between, for example, Berlin or the Berlinale and the Venice Film Festival, which is of course related to the number of titles that we screen. And as you know, Venice, which is probably has a structure more similar to that of Cannes, has a very limited number of titles that are screened, which have been in the last few years, 3 years or so, approximately between 55 and 60 maximum.
That's your official selection?
That's the official selection, of course. So, and I'm sure that's a much smaller number than Berlin. With these premises in mind, I think we can actually see the two clips, and in this case, I'm quite sure these are two films you are very familiar with.
So, Elena, let's start with the second clip, the Roy Andersson film. Was that actually an obvious competition film for you when you saw it?
I think this film was, in fact, one of those rare occasions, I think, or at least as far as I know, in my experience, on which everyone somehow agreed from the very beginning that was certainly a very unique film. And somehow it also shows that it cannot provide a recipe. It's really something that somehow seemed to go against any kind of recipe. And this is probably what made it so special from the very beginning. The reason for which, I think it was the reaction we had when we saw this film was exactly the same reaction that we had again this morning. Anytime you see it, there's something that connects immediately to the audience. But even more than that, at the end of the process of watching the film, you get the sense that all the different parts get together and provide a much broader picture. That is not simply a snapshot of the present or a snapshot of Swedish life, but it connects actually to so many historical processes that have involved all different countries, regardless their culture, their background, and whatever. And this is really one of those rare situations in which films and film art approach, or together actually, they manage to approach issues that are still so present in our society, that of course is related to human beings and the ways human beings connect, but also the ways that society affects human beings. When we watch films, obviously we never think about all these elements and put them together and say, wow, this is a fantastic film, this is the perfect recipe. It has human beings, it has a local flavor, it talks about history, it's a shared history, and then we have to take it. But it's somehow something that engages you or engages the viewer from the very beginning into its own world. It's a cinematic world, of course. And again, with festivals like Venice, which have this kind of very tight selection, this issue of creating a space, a world of its own, makes a film like this quite naturally, I would say, a film for the official selection, or a film that would stay until the end in the discussion as one of the strong films that the festival can take. It's again this idea of preserving the festival space and the few opportunities that a festival like Venice give to filmmakers. It's a way to preserve the role of film festivals, of presenting film art, as a way to see or to look at things from a different angle, from a perspective that could be a perspective of an auteur, or it could be a perspective that somehow brings in and get together all the different elements of film art, from sound to image to the film history, as you said. So you see references to many different things. And that goes much beyond the local flavor. Of course, it's also a daring film. And we had the feeling that maybe this film would not probably be an easy film for the audience. But again, that's another task of a festival, as well as a task from the filmmaker, to dare to create its own, or her or his own world, and present it to the people which are sitting in the theater. Regardless the sort of the logic of profit, the logic of money making, the logic of how an accomplished film should actually talk to the audience. And the interesting thing, in fact, is that of course the Golden Lion was a big thing, but the film, I think, from even from after the first screening in Venice, was received as one of the most surprising things from even all Asian participants to the festival, Asian press, for example, and people that certainly had no connection to European culture and even less to Swedish culture.
But then again, also this film, of course, has a director who was already very well known, very famous, actually. What importance does that have? You know, having a director like Roy Andersson creates an interest for the festival program, and from the beginning.
Okay, I will answer this question from the perspective of a film festival scholar, so not so much from the Venice perspective.
Go ahead.
To get out of that a little bit. That's an interesting question, in fact, especially with, again, festivals that take very few films, that is basically Cannes and Venice, and how much the name of the director somehow provide, if I can use this term, a brand that the festival can use. That's a big discussion among film festival scholars about that. I would say that, of course, the fact that the director is established is an element, but certainly it's not an element that affects the decision. Simply the reason for that is simply because the number of films that are taken in the official competition is so limited, and somehow the number of established directors that have maybe good works in that year is probably much bigger than that. So somehow it's not that would make a difference. Probably the fact that he's an established director has also contributed to make a mature film, or something that looks even more accomplished. But sometimes the same thing could happen with young filmmakers, as we've seen in Cannes recently.
So the second film you had a clip from, a trailer of, was Kapningen, the hijacking by Tobias Lindholm, and he was then at that time a unestablished director. Actually, Trust Nordisk handled the international sales. Why did you choose to show that clip here?
That's also the reason for which I chose these two films, which are actually not from the same year in Venice. Of course, the Roy Andersson's film was last year, and Kapningen was 2012. The reason for which I chose these two films is that somehow they really, I think, provide two different key cases for two different situations. With Tobias Lindholm's film, it was really something that we felt it was interesting. It could have been interesting from the very first time we saw the work in progress in Göteborg, in fact. I happened to see a clip there in the presentation. It looked very fascinating, and then we followed up the production of the film. Then we saw it when it was completed, and we were confirmed that it was a very interesting, promising, unestablished at that moment director, even though, of course, again, it was not someone completely unknown, as he had worked with established directors as a scriptwriter. But again, I do not think that the name of the director or the history of the director is the main point for a festival like Venice, in which we see usually above 1,500 films every year. Of course, with a film like Tobias Lindholm's film, the fact that it was not yet an established director, again, probably made it more natural for it to be in the Orizzonti section. And again, it's all related to the fact that the possibilities of the number of titles in competition, as well as the number of titles in Orizzonte, is so limited that they have to be somehow selected also accordingly to how, again, not just how solid, but how broad the film feels to us also.
Just to explain to those who haven't been to Venice, they have, like Cannes, a competition section, and then, like Cannes, un certain regard, a sidebar within the official selection. And the Orizzonte, the hijacking was actually presented in Orizzonte.
Yes, and the concept behind this Orizzonte section is, again, to look at things maybe in a different way, but also somehow to present or introduce young filmmakers or simply filmmakers that are not yet established. So that is also the concept behind that section. So
but that's also where We Are the Best by Lucas Moodysson was presented 2 years ago.
And the other idea, of course, the fact that there are both sort of unestablished or young filmmakers together with maybe established filmmakers, like the case of Lucas Moodysson, with films that or again, the final decision is, of course, the director's decision, but we feel somehow a more consistent to that section rather than to the titles in competition. It changes also every year. It's really a matter of a final balance. So if there is no magic recipe for a film to be in the official selection, I think there's even less a magic recipe for being in one of the section or in the other section.
We all expect a magic recipe, So I won't forget that question. Anyway, we need to move on. Rikke Ennis is the most charming and the most professional sales agent in film business. Since 2008, she has been the CEO of Trust Nordisk, the largest sales agent in the Nordic region, with a catalogue of more than 600 films. She's also part of the management of Centropa. You also have a clip.
Yes.
Do you want to say something about it?
Yes, I would love to. Actually,
Mike?
Yeah. Oops. Good idea. I was actually supposed to show today a clip of The Hereafter, Magnus van Horen's film that was in Cannes, Directors Fortnight, and then The Hunt, Thomas Vinterberg, and finally The Wave, which is like a Norwegian disaster movie, Roar Uthark, because I think it shows a great variety of Nordic films, what you can actually see from Nordic cinema. But then I chose to show you a presentation that I made for the Chinese audiences and production companies. So excuse me for this being a total show-off, very American style, but I think it gives you an idea of, a lot of great Nordic films that we have represented through the years, and we'll talk afterwards. When you're in China and you sit among 25 Chinese people that you cannot communicate, it's like through interpretation translators. This is a good way of just saying, this is who we are, because you can't explain. Yeah. No, but I think this just shows, the great variety of films that we have in the Nordic countries, and you saw many of the Swedish films as well. And just to give you a quick introduction of who we are, we have around 20 films a year, where I would say that 15 to 17 actually goes to major festivals, like Nikki's and Elena's here. And I think it's absolutely essential for us to have the festivals as a window to show these films.
Why?
Because it's like, I don't know how many films are actually made in Europe, but it's a lot.
1,600.
How much?
1,600
feature
released.
films, yeah. And I think last year you received over 5,000 films to watch. You've seen 15 or even the same. I mean, that is a lottery ticket to have, a ticket to actually go to even main competition, either in Venice and Berlin. And that shows the distributors that what we're talking about here is quality filmmaking. So that creates awareness, visibility for us as a sales agent, And it's a little bit like investing in state bonds. It's investing in talent making. So although you go to like a smaller section from the festival, then at least you have, you know, a clear vision for that talent or that filmmaker in the future. So, I mean, one thing is being in the main competition. Obviously, that gives us a fantastic window to the world to sell the film. But even, you know, a sidebar is fantastic for us at a festival.
Is it also important for the sales?
It's extremely important for the sales. We are, of course, very depending on the reviews of a film. But very often we are in a lucky position due to the Scandinavian wave and the word of mouth of Scandinavian films that we can sell the films beforehand. So we often start selling the film even a year before it actually hits the festival. And we actually strategize together with producer and the local film institute what kind of festival would be the right one for this film. So what we try to do with auteurs and known directors is actually to sell the film already based on a script and a concept package of cast. And sometimes if we're talking new talents, we can even do a promo and show it, you know, perhaps one market before the film actually hits the international market. For some films, like Magnus's film here in...
The Hereafter?
Yeah, The Hereafter in Cannes. Of course, that would be a film that, you know, the world has to see before actually choosing whether to buy the film or not. But one thing is for sure with that kind of filmmaker like Magnus, I mean, if this film does not sell worldwide, it doesn't really matter because his next film will definitely have a huge window to worldwide distribution.
So all three of you actually see a lot of Swedish films. You see a lot. Elena does as well. And Nikki, you also see a few Swedish films every year. What would you say is the position of Swedish film from an international perspective? What are the strengths of Swedish films?
Well, for example, in the last 3 years, also since I basically came to Stockholm part of the year, I had the chance actually to see quite a few Swedish films and also to share this experience of watching Swedish films with my colleagues as well back in Venice. And we actually were confirmed about something that we had experienced also, of course, before. The fact that the production strategies and the production values are very solid. So that is usually, I mean, despite the fact that the film might be selected or not be selected, but the level of the production from, I think, Swedish films, and I would also say most of Nordic films, is really quite impressive. Also in a comparative perspective with the number of titles that we see. And also, I think the number of titles that we receive is actually quite significant for fairly small countries. Yeah.
I mean, for me, one of the most fascinating thing about Swedish cinema, it's, let's say, its variety and diversity. So let's say how many different aspects of filmmaking, how many traditions we saw Roy Andersson. I mean, in my eyes and in the eyes of many colleagues, probably top 10 alive filmmaking out there, and I'm talking about the whole world. You have somebody like Ruben Östlund, where Force Majeure, even so last year it was not in the main competition, did a bigger buzz than some of the titles in the competition, and I think it's one of the best example of having a film that is so universal and international that whoever sees it reacts emotionally to it. Then I'm very happy that you mention the Hereafter, because for me this is an outstanding talent, an outstanding debut, very anticipated because people in the industry knew his short films. And also this film, I think it's so specific because just by the story, when you're going to see it, you're going to understand this film can actually only be placed in Sweden, because Sweden is the only country who has basically a law and has like a, let's say, MacGuffin, how Hitchcock used to call it, that works with the story. This film could be not shot in any or set in any other country of the world because it just wouldn't work story-wise. At the same time, you know, you have snabba cash, you have like very big films, you have family entertainment films. So I think the variety is really this richness, and wherever you go, we cannot say, okay, there's this one you know, like direction. There's only this one director, and I think it's connected because you have very good, of course, school and education. There's a couple of film schools. For me, it's all start with the film schools, and also, and this is great, that you have such a rich, actually, cinema tradition, that young people go to see films, that you have cinema takes, because we are talking about movie history, and the most important thing for directors and producers, for me, is basically to see films. And this, I feel that basically Swedish filmmakers are watching films. And I'm not only talking about Bergman and their own stuff, but they really, when you see a film by Magnus, for example, you feel how much influence he has from world cinema. So this is really amazing, and I think this is something you have really to keep up, you know, like to keep it institutional and really to force the young people, the young students to go and see cinema, because that's a thing you have to work with.
Something we discuss quite a lot in Sweden at the moment, actually, the importance of film culture and the culture climate in general, actually. So it's interesting that you pointed out. I wouldn't myself think that Sweden would be that good at it, actually. I would always wish more, but still. So, Rikke, what is your opinion?
I think that from a talent perspective, first-time directors, I think Sweden has a very strong profile. I mean, you can see it this year in Cannes, obviously. I think when it comes to following up on second, third time, fourth time directors, it's a little bit more difficult. It feels like there's a gap, and it feels like many production companies are choosing not really to follow up on those directors, but more go into the television direction, which I think from at least a Nordic perspective is a little bit scary. I mean, we have these statistics about, you know, how many films actually sold in Sweden, Norway, Denmark. And, you know, I think 5 years ago, Sweden was in the top, and going down to actually being one of the countries selling less from a feature film perspective. TV series is a different story.
And documentaries?
Documentaries, thanks to, well, we've sold Eric Gandini's films. I think we've done quite well. So
and you sold the Ingrid Bergman.
And Ingrid Bergman now, yes, absolutely, now in Cannes, which was a great success. And obviously with Ingrid Bergman on the poster, we were very proud, all of us. But I think, you know, if you look at, for example, from the Danish perspective, you have auteur directors that have stayed for many years with the same producer, and then tried, you know, to follow up on the experiences from the first, second, and third film. And I think sometimes that, you know, family bond is something we don't see as much in Sweden. So I think that's just, you know, kind of like an opportunity to look into what can be done to make it even stronger.
And if I may add a line, I think it's also important to notice that short films also produced in Sweden are confirming this kind of variety. So I think it's really a variety and a kind of a way to encourage freedom of expression, but in all different ways, where you making use of film art in, you know, all the possible directions, as you were saying. And I think this is also confirmed in short films.
It's really good for us to hear about you pointing out the variety and the diversity of Swedish films. It's really a question we're working a lot with in Sweden. Another question, as you all know, is gender equality. And when going through your clips here before, including the clips from the documentary panelists, we noted that there weren't too many female filmmakers behind those films that you chose, although the statistics of your selection was much better than the statistics of the festivals you represent. You usually have like 2 female filmmakers in a competition section of 20 films or something like that. So do you actually discuss this question when selecting films for your festivals? Do you count the number of female filmmakers, or is there a discussion?
This case is men first.
This is
to be equal.
A rather uncomfortable question, perhaps.
Okay, so just this year we had, from the same filmmaker I showed in the name of, Malgosia Szymovska, she had a film called Body in the competition, and she got awarded together with Afrim, the first clip ex aequo, the Best Director Award. She went on stage and said, "Thank you for this. I'm an artist, I'm a filmmaker, and I'm a woman. That's a winning combination." So I think that's something I also like to confirm. I was born in Russia. We all know that nowadays, especially with our president, maybe it's considered the most chauvinistic state there is. As well as in Panorama and in Forum this year, we had films which were directed by a female director, which were produced by a female director, sold by a female sales agent, and actually had female main characters. And one, it was even that there were 3 main characters, and 2 of them were female and 1 male, and in the other it was a mother-daughter relationship.
But that's really good, but that's one film. So
no, that's two films. Two films from Russia. Just as an example, you know, like where the country where everybody is saying that there's only like male filmmakers whatsoever. So basically, I'd like, for example, to see a film, and I'm very often seeing films which are in a rough cut base. So basically, it says rough cut, and then I see the movie. So often I don't even know who the makers are. I don't know if it's a male or female director, producer, whatsoever. So the moment I'm sitting there and I'm judging cinema, and it's with many of my colleagues, we are basically judging what we see. We are not even aware of the...
I don't believe you, but anyway.
No, but it is like this, because I don't...
I just told everyone that you know almost everyone in the film industry, Nikki.
Yeah, but if we're talking about new films, you know, so sometimes I don't really know the makers, always, so I'm surprised. I can tell from our point of view that really, let's say, the quality, that's the main thing. We're discussing films on a content level, because a lot of people are asking me, does it important to know you or not to know you? Is it important what kind of sales agents we have? Is it true that it's like with Cannes, where basically it's 2 companies having 90% of the competition lineup? With us, and this I can say, you know, like with a clear mind, we discuss the movies themselves. Also, I think, and there I'd like to quote my colleague from Cannes, Thierry Frémont, even we're not always agreeing. He said that in our job and in our position, and let's say in our chain of command, we are already seeing films that are done. We cannot influence so much the filmmaking process. I know the numbers that when they go to film school, it's like 50-50 between man and female, and then when they start making the process, and then it's 17%, I think, of female directors. We are too far in the chain of command to be able to do it. And all the female filmmakers, producers I know, when you start arguing with them, and then if they would get a feeling that they are selected because they are a female and not because of the quality of the film, they would just withdraw the film, and I would never talk to them again. They would be really angry to be considered and to know that their film was just chosen because some gender quota issue.
But do you actually count if you have 2 films made by a female and a male director, and you find them very equal quality-wise? Would it be important that there is a female director having made one of the films? Would that be an issue for you at all? Would you rather choose the female director? It's just interesting, I think.
I think I would lose my artistic integrity, which for me it's like the most important thing, because that's like basically what I'm playing for. I'm playing on my taste, I'm playing on my understanding, and I wouldn't want to justify, let's say, me judging a movie by this kind of fact. And that's also, I wouldn't care is the budget big or not big. I wouldn't care who is behind it. If I start thinking like this, I'm gonna go crazy in my head, because you're right. I know a lot of people. I'm getting pressure from so many sides. Dieter Kostler, my boss, always, when he's asked how much pressure you're getting and isn't it difficult to fall down due to this pressure, he's always saying that he gets so many pressures, but from all the sides, and that's like the only way he's standing up, because basically we get so many people who know us, who keep calling us. Imagine I see a movie whereas there's a director with a producer, where's the actress, where's DOP, I know 4 of them, plus they have 5 co-producers, plus they have a sales agent, plus they have local distribution. We get so many information from the different side, and I think we just have to stick with ourselves and the quality of the film. I know it's not really answering your question, but I don't want to, you know, like go down that road, because I think once we start, then we're gonna start compromising maybe with other issues, and then we end up in a way where it's not about the quality of the films anymore.
Yeah. So, Rikke, would you at Trust Nordisk, you've of course handled many films by female directors, including Susanne Bier. Would you ever, who won the Oscar the other year, would you be able to use, are you able to use the fact that there is a female director as a selling point when marketing the film?
Absolutely not. No. I mean, distributors, they care about the film, and that's what's in focus, and not really, you know, whether it's a male or a female as a director. What, of course, we do discuss, but that's before the production starts, and when you have a script, who would be the right director? And if you have a love story, like now we have a new film based on a book by Karen Blixen, I mean, it makes sense to discuss female directors, because we think it's a female voice that has to be come out through this film. And that's where it starts, you know, the whole female-male chat. But as a selling point, not at all. Actually, I had this producer coming to me and say, you know, look at this film. We have a female director, female script writer, and 3 of the main casts are female. That's a selling point. Isn't that good enough for you to sell it? And it was like, no, of course not. I mean, it should always be the artistic quality in focus.
I have so many questions, and I want to talk with you for such a long time, but we should let the audience in, because you might have really interesting questions. There are mics. If anybody would like to ask a question. Where is the... okay.
Ja. Jo, jag tänkte, Rikke, om det är så att...
Would it be
yes,
possible?
I am.
Good.
If what you're saying is that Karen Blixen and women can write then a love story, but if there are other subjects that women can do, is that possible? I mean, if you have a war story or something, would you put a woman on that, or?
I would love to. And
yeah,
then I would love to put a love story into the war story.
Yes.
No, but of course, I mean, first of all, it's director in focus, and Susanne Bier, she chooses her own themes, obviously. But if you want to have new talent, then of course you have to discuss at some point who would be the right person to do that, and who has, you know, that feeling for that specific story. And of course, I'm sure a male director could do Karen Blixen, but you know, it might be that you get a more human touch, or like love touch to the Karen Blixen story. It's not decided yet. It might be a male director, so let's see what happens.
Another question, do you see any difference in the content made by women and men? Do you see that in general? In the festivals?
Yeah. I think...
Do you have any idea about that, or that is too specific, maybe?
I think, you know, it's hard to say that I see, you know, 2 years ago I saw a change within the female direction, you know. I think it depends so much on the director. I mean, look at Malgoska. She has a way of expressing herself that is, I think that in some ways could be from a male director. So I think, again, the female discussion, I think, is not really relevant for the quality of the films. I think it depends on the voice of that person that speaks, and that, you know, specific personal story they have to tell.
Good morning, everyone. First, my name is Freddie. First, I think that one part of Swedish filmmaking you didn't mention was that many of the Swedish directors going to festivals, not to the main competitions maybe, but to other sections, even of the big festivals. They're not coming from film school. They're coming from art school. Like Anna Odell, like Måns Månsson, like Axel Petersen. And they are not in the box. They are a bit out of the box. They are making their own films, very personal films, also visually. And they make it to the festivals. And I think this is a bit special for Sweden, that so many comes from art school.
Yeah.
Second, I totally disagree with you concerning this with women filmmakers. I think that if we want the other stories, we have to encourage the female directors and put them into our festivals. I think we in Gothenburg, we work hard with this, and I don't think that the quality of the Gothenburg program has gone down because we have a positive approach to female filmmaking. The contrary. I mean, to get the other stories, please encourage the female filmmakers.
Do we have any other question?
Concerning the cultural climate, when in public Swedish debate there seems to be an instrumental task that film are expected to fulfill. It should represent the ethical diversity. And one of the most stupid things lately is that the film should be the guards for democracy. And there seems to be an enormous gap between that keywords used in the debate and the films that you've shown, which are very, very immoral and unethical, and like Child's Post, which is one of the best piece of art that I have consumed. It has a moral that is almost disgusting, but it's so very, very good. Is that right? Is there a gap between your thoughts and what is the commission?
Interesting question. Let me quote, I think I even have him on my t-shirt. It's Vladimir Ilyich, who, as you all know, said very early that film, it's like the strongest propaganda there is. We all know about the power of the image. I have to say this because we started this discussion. In my eyes, the most interesting female director in world history is probably the one that really pointed out how dangerous an image can be if it's used in the wrong context. I would disagree a little bit about Charles' post that it's immoral, because the position of the filmmaker itself, it's not immoral, it's just reflecting what's going on in the country. And this is, I think, it's a thin red line, but it's a big difference. Just picking up what Freddie said about art school, for me, probably one of the most interesting German post-war filmmakers. Fassbinder didn't do any education whatsoever. He's really an autodidact. And Germans, for example, hated his films back then. He needed to go outside because he basically showed them a mirror. And this is Siegfried Kracau, that we all know, that he was always saying film is a mirror of the society. I think the films that are so interesting and are staying so much with us, if they're coming from our own country, they're very often hurting us because they show us, they reflect a reality that we maybe don't want to see. They're not so pleasing, but those are the films that really makes a change. Those are the films that go down in history. This is, let's say, the European identity, cultural identity, diversity we can play on. That's like the only thing I think we have to fight Hollywood, to fight Netflix, to saying we have this kind of films. We have these films that are really doing something with us, are really changing us. But I agree with you, it shouldn't be, like done too much, pointed out, too much commissioned, too much doing it after a recipe, because all of us, I mean, I see personally sometimes more than 1,000 movies a year, but I can tell not any of you, and I will never tell you how to do a movie in a right way. And we all know that even the most well-paid, super experienced studio executives in the US cannot do it. And we have Transformers and what is it, flopping, you know, we have this 200 million box office, whatever, films that don't work. Nobody can say, go out there, tag this kind of topic and do a movie out of it. I think the only way it works is that somebody comes to you and says, listen, I'm from this family background, I have this issue, I read this story in the newspaper, this is something that is bothering me, please give me money, trust in me, and let me do it. I think that's the only way a system can work. And maybe in Sweden, but this is also a European problem, there should be really more trust into young artists who have a vision really to go with them and not think so much about television, for example. I know that in Europe, for me, the biggest problem right now is really public television, who wants to have everything formatted, who is telling so much directors how their movies are gonna be, should be. And with the young generation of filmmakers, I feel a kind of self-censorship, that they are afraid if they are too radical, if they are like too outspoken, they will never be financed. So in a way, it's a problem with the young generation, even in their brain, that they are not believing enough in themselves to go out there and do what they do, because they are too afraid that they are not even be able to finance it and to do it. And Magnus von Horn is for me such a brilliant example that somebody really says, okay, I have to do this no matter what. I know it was a very long road for him, but I think which is happening with the film now, being in Cannes, that's like the biggest reward there is. I don't know if I 100% answered your question, but I tried to.
Follow-up question, but it's a trap, so be aware. Would you prefer a film that raises questions or a film that's giving answers?
Always raising questions. There's no answer. We are talking about art, you know, there's not one way. There's always two sides of the stories. I think filmmakers should raise questions and not give answers. It's up to the audience to see a movie. So I don't understand Q&As where directors are asked, what do you want to tell with your film? I think that's wrong.
I had so many topics I wanted to discuss with you. I wanted to talk about Romania. I wanted to talk about the actual costs of having a filming competition in Cannes, for example. I wanted to hear much more of your thoughts, but we're running out of time. There's a new panel coming soon, and we should have time for some coffee before. I don't think there is time for another question. Where's Jonas?
I can speak without the mic.
Okay.
I have a movie, we are doing the final post-production here, and we are not having any sex, we are not having any crime, no violence at all. It's a love story to life. It is 290 minutes long. Does it have a chance at all to come to any festival wherever on the planet? Or does it kick out 2 other movies from the scheduling, so you can't have 290 minutes? That's my question.
Can I maybe take, I will answer briefly with an example that I actually, I think it fits your question perfectly. In 2012, the same year as Capringen was in Venice, in Orizzonti there was a Chinese documentary. That was a Chinese documentary spoken not even in Mandarin but in local dialects. It was over 3 hours long. There was not even sex, not love story, it was just simply 3 girls, 3 kids, and the countryside. The film was selected in Orizzonti, and it won the award of that section. And the award in that year was actually, since that year, it was combined a feature film and documentary films were in the same section. And there was no problem that it took the slot of 2 films.
So there is hope. Thank you.
What was the name of the film?
Senza Me, 3 Sisters by Wan Bing.
So thank you. Let's have some coffee. Thank you, the panel. Great to have you here.
So, welcome back, everybody. I would just say briefly that I'm Sarah Ryster, festival manager of Swedish Docs here at the Swedish Film Institute. And here with me on stage, I have the dream team of documentary programmers. Welcome. Sirka Möller, the German documentary queen, who has worked for numerous festivals since 1988. Also worked at Deckert Distribution, sales agent, and speaks like 500 languages or so. Eller hur, Sirka? Eller?
Lite svenska också.
Ja, det är bra. Then we have the always eloquent, enthusiastic and well-dressed Hussein Karimboy from Sundance. Former head of programming at Sheffield Docfest. And you also worked in Australia with several festivals. Mm-hmm. And now you are a programmer at Sundance.
Yes.
Yeah, great. And last but not least, the man you will find with a big smile any hour of the day during IDFA, always ready with a sharp and fast comment on anything. Martin Tepas from IDFA, head of programming, right? Welcome. Yeah. Okay, Sirka, we will start with Berlinale, the grand old dame. Berlinale turned 65 years old this year. There were 443 films screened, 336,000 tickets sold, and you have a budget around 22 million euros. In the whole of Berlinale, there are 13 sections, but for docs, I would say it's mostly panorama, forum, Berlinale shorts, generation, or culinary cinema.
Yes, and if you happen to be a German filmmaker, there's also a chance in the Perspektive Deutsches Kino, which is actually the most balanced in terms of female-male directors. The head of the section is very aware of this and proactive.
Right.
Since that was raised before.
Yeah. Yeah, and would you like to start with the clips, or would you?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I thought I should wake you all up and bring you into the world of documentary. I have brought 2 clips. They're both by filmmakers that have not really had their like feature-length direction debuts, by people who have been working in the industry in other functions, but they give you an overview over the variety of films we have at Berlinale. The first one is Vulva 3.0 by 2 female directors, and Ulrike Zimmermann and Claudia Richards. It's a German film, and it's a very straightforward documentary, as you will see in the clip. And the second one is a film that I like very much. It's the first ever documentary from Greenland that Berlinale has screened. It's called Sumer, Sound of a Revolution, by sorry, I'm getting the name. Anyway, Inuk, yes, thank you. Inuk Silishög. And it combines a lot of the things that we actually like quite much. And I also thought it's nice to give you some music that you haven't heard. I mean, I really think that listening to the music, they could be as big as the Sugar Man film. And it's, you know, Berlinale has a strong interest through the native initiative that the festival has also for native filmmaking from minority and indigenous filmmakers. So I think that's a really good example for that, and it's a great film. So let's watch.
Yeah.
So I think the last clip illustrated to you what Nikki said before about what kind of political films we're interested in at Berlinale, because the filmmaker and the producer are both Greenlandic, and they really wanted to show that story that I think is really fascinating, how this rock band, by publishing wearing the first ones. They met in Denmark. They would have never met in their own country. They met there while studying, and they produced these albums in Greenlandic that actually started this whole, or kind of fueled this youth movement that was trying to get home rule from Denmark. So, and the music's great.
Yeah, thank you. Can you tell us a little about the Panorama documentary section, how you work? I mean, you are working together with, you're doing the pre-selection with another person, or? Yeah.
Yes, the way it works, because the Berlinale has quite a lot of, it's a very big festival, it has a lot of sections, so the Berlinale has, for certain regions of the world, we have delegates that will pre-select films from this region, certainly for Asia, for France, for a lot of countries, but there's also a lot of countries where we don't have delegates. So all the films that get entered from regions that don't have delegates who do this pre-filtering are screened by a screening team. In Panorama, we're two. We always watch together. It's not that just one person, so we always discuss the films. We do get quite a lot. I mean, in the 3 months we go through around 700 films. So, and from that, Panorama documentaries, the Panorama documentary section screens around 20 documentaries, and not all of them come through us, but our Wieland Speck, the artistic director of Panorama, also travels to festivals. He travels abroad to preview stuff, so he does invite stuff from his travels. So there is, from the previewing, there's also stuff that's getting in, but it's not that everything comes through us, but it also comes filtered through the delegates or through the travels. And sometimes it's also so that because Berlinale has a lot of different sections that have different identities, and we're very keen to cooperate with them. So I would always, if I see a film where the filmmaker might not have been aware that ticking another box would mean that another committee would watch the film, and I think it might fit for them, I'll give them a call and say, hey, there's this film that I really think would fit your criteria, why don't you take a look at it? So, but I really encourage everybody not to just focus on one section at Berlinale. The one thing that I should tell you, though, is competition that Nikki talked about has very, very few documentaries, and they're really kind of top notch. I mean, we had, last one was Patricio Guzman, before that it was Errol Morris, so it's the kind of higher end of the documentary. Not to say that you're not all great filmmakers, but I think just by setting your goal to get into competition, you might not really succeed. So entering a documentary only to competition at Berlinale, I would not recommend, because it will be a waste of your entry fee if you don't at least let the other sections see it.
Do you need world premieres?
In Panorama, not. Competition will need world premieres. Panorama would need European premieres. There is, for Swedish filmmakers, probably interesting to know, if, a lot of you will have premieres at the Gothenburg Film Festival, and for us, it's a question whether the film in Gothenburg screens just in the Swedish section, that is what we would call then the national part of the program, or if it screens in the international section. If it screens in the international section, we cannot screen it. If it's just in the Swedish or Nordic ghetto, then it's it's at least eligible. So that, I think, is for many of you important to know, because Gothenburg is just so briefly before Berlinale, and of course you all fight to get better slots in Gothenburg, but if it's too good, then it's not so interesting for us anymore.
Great. And Rikke, can you tell us a little bit what you are looking for?
Well, Panorama is the I think after, the festival started with a competition, and then Panorama was started for all these great films that couldn't get into competition. So Panorama has very much this kind of higher end art house for bigger audiences. So the more complicated stuff goes to Forum, but Panorama is the kind of in between, yes, ambitious filmmaking, but also kind of films that will find a paying audience and not just a kind of arty, very arty audience. Panorama screens fiction and documentary, so very often the documentaries are looking at subjects that that would fit for a wider audience. So music docs are always good, work well. Films that have to do with film can work well. Like this year we had the Fassbinder film from this Danish Fassbinder film, the forgot his name. I did the Q&A with him, but I can't remember his name. It's really embarrassing that
Christian
happens.
Broad Thompson.
Yes, thank you. So these themes go very well, but Panorama is also, in a way, the biggest LGBTQIA festival section, because the Panorama, the founder of the Panorama, Manfred Salzgeber, has been introducing the Teddy Award, which is an award that is across Berlinale for films from all sections, including competition, forum, generation, which is the children's section at Berlinale. To the jury looks at all films that deal with lesbian, gay, trans, queer, intersex subjects. It's much bigger than the Queer Palm in Cannes, if any of you have ever heard about that. So Teddy is really an important fixture. It's also that a lot of queer programmers come to Berlin, so we're always looking for good queer films, documentaries and fiction. So that is one of the things that Panorama is known for. But it's also, you know, films like the first one, Vulva 3.0, by 2 German filmmakers. They've really been looking at, in the film, at a lot of questions surrounding the representation or the discussion of female sexuality in the movies. And I can't think of anything else right now.
Okay, thank you, Sirka. We move on to the documentary.
Sorry, one more thing. Okay, yeah. Panorama, because for a lot of you it's important, does it have a competition or not? Panorama does not per se have a competition. It's a non-competition section of the Berlinale, but we have audience awards. We have an audience award for the best fiction and for the best documentary. And actually, because Rikke said before, like how well a film does at a festival, audience awards are normally what distributors really like, because then they know they will get bums on seats. So the Panorama Audience Award has been quite a good indicator, and we're very diligent at getting people to vote. Like every screening is introduced, we really try to, we want to know what people really like. So that also reflects the position of Berlinale as the biggest audience festival. So we're a festival for professionals and general audiences, which is also what's attractive for filmmakers, that they don't just meet professionals, but that they also meet normal people who will give them feedback on their film.
Thank you.
Oh, there's lots of juries in Berlinale that also go across all sections. There's like the film critics, the Presky jury. There is the first feature, but there's also the interreligious jury. So there is, like, if you go to the Berlinale website, the kind of press release with all the awards is amazing. But I think, you know, as a filmmaker, it's nice to get awards, but you know, it's not the be all and end all. So don't knock a festival just because it's non-competitive and say, oh, but I want to get into competition by all means. And you know, some of the more interest, you know, a lot of the other sections are also at Berlinale non-competitive, but with some juries that give some awards. Like Forum is a non-competitive section, but you might actually win the Caligari Film Prize. I would also, because you know, Nikki only talked about the competition, I would like to tell you that Berlinale has a lot of different sections, so it's actually worthwhile looking at the website, reading up the profiles of the sections. And I know, for example, that my colleagues from the Generation, which is the children's and youth film section, they also screen quite a lot of documentaries. So, and they have a great passion for films from the Nordic countries, because here you're quite good at producing good and interesting stuff for young people. You tend to take them quite seriously, which is nice.
Yeah, we are usually quite successful when it comes to Generation, I would say.
And if any of you are ever at Berlinale, we're now really putting a focus on documentaries much more. We're producing this leaflet, or like a little book, which lists all the documentaries that are screening across the different sections to make it easier for anybody who's looking for documentaries. You know, it's great, but nobody knows about this, so that's why I brought it.
Is this new for this year, or
no?
You
It
did
existed last year already.
Oh, okay.
See, you even don't know.
Sorry, I only have meetings, you know. Anyway, we are moving to the next person here. We're heading for the documentary capital, Amsterdam, and IDFA, the biggest documentary festival in the world. You screen like 300 films or so, and you have a wonderful, great audience, and it's very involved, I would say. Great Q&As, and yeah, tell us a bit more.
We like quantity. No, it's a little joke. Yeah, we've been around for 27 years. We're not only a festival, we're also a big network event for professionals. We have the Forum since 1993, which is a huge co-production and co-financing market. We have a market called Docs for Sale, with 450 titles where people from all over the world watch them, festival programmers, buyers, commissioning editors, whoever. We have a funding body, just to give you a little bit of IDFA in the broader sense. A funding agency helping out films or filmmakers from developing countries, which also has a new scheme, by the way, IDFA Bertha Fund Europe, so which connects European producers with filmmakers from developing countries, which might be interesting for some of you. We have an IDFA Academy, which is a training scheme for 4 days for about 80 people, learning about the industry, the trends, everything you need to know. Network, of course, who is who and why. And we have a summer school, which is also in the summer for young filmmakers, when and they will be helped out with their project. So it's a project-driven week that's next month or end of this month. And we are a huge festival for audiences. We have about 230,000 admissions for documentary. That's quite amazing. And we work with a lot of partners, like the Modern Museum, the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, the Film Museum in the Melkweg, which is, well, the Milky Way to translate it for music films. So we have lots of partners working with us, and we really work with them. I mean, it's not just a location and we say we're going to screen these films. No, we do ask them to curate programs, etc. So they surprise us as well. Something about the program, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
We have about 7 competitions. I won't name them all. You can find them on the website, and I brought a flyer. They're outside. But just to name a few, we have one called the Doc Lab competition, which is all about transmedia. A digital competition, which is basically a pioneer in the field of, well, transmedia projects. Really great. Kasper Sonne, my colleague, has been doing a wonderful job. And we have, for example, Kids and Docs section, which is not a competitive section, but it's always consisting of about 15 films for children up to 13 years, which is quite special. We've been doing that for a long time, and we're a bit of a pioneer there.
And you have screenings for schools.
And we have school screenings in the mornings.
Yeah.
I think it's about 7,000 or 8,000 school kids gonna see films from 9 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock. So they will occupy all the seats in the early mornings.
And that's your new audience, right?
Yeah, we're creating our new audience. So it's not just about creating a platform for young filmmakers, but also creating our audiences, because that's what's necessary in documentary sometimes. If you look at the grey heads in the audience, sometimes you think, okay, how do we change this? And documentary has become really popular the last 10 years. Also with the mixed festivals in Berlin, you can see, in Cannes, in Toronto, Venice. So that's really something we're really proud of, working at IDFA also.
Do you want to show your clips, or?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah,
sure.
I won't say much. Let's look at them.
Yeah, sure.
Did that wake you up?
Yeah.
Well, I think the common denominator here is creativity. Creativity in filmmaking. But the first film, I mean, it's really an amazing film by a 25-year-old director, Dutch director, who was in our main competition last year.
Is it a debut? Or?
It's a debut film.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and he made it for little money, but like he basically voiced the voice of a ghost, someone who drowned in the sea as a refugee going to Europe, and he was sort of the voice of someone who was no longer there and ended up in Greece, which of course is a very relevant and urgent topic. And I totally agree with what Nikki said. I mean, it's something solid there, and still it's cinema, which is the fantastic combination. And the second film, it's about creativity in a way, not just the filmmaking itself, but also what they do with all the game consoles, you know, making music out of it and basically using it to the fullest. If you look at the film, it was a total surprise. It just ended up on our desk and we were so pleased with it because it was so crazy and different, but also good to have this for new audiences. I mean,
yeah. Did you also bring some people?
Yeah, we had massive parties and stuff.
I mean, did you bring this guy?
Documentary is fun too, you know. So that's what I want to sort of get across. It's not just misery. Of course, we screen a lot of films about a million kinds of subjects from all over the world. More than 60 countries are represented at IDFA. So it's truly a global festival, I think. And so many voices, you know. From if we talk about diversity and variety, I think IDFA is the place to be. We don't have 22 million. We have about 4 to 5 million turnover. But in a way, we're a global village. And IDFA is a global village for about 12 days for documentary.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm so surprised that you, I can see you have an increase in the ticket sales every year. So you're just like growing and growing. Where it's going to end.
Where is it going to end? Yeah. Naomi Klein wouldn't be happy with it because it's just like this, where will it end? But still, we think there are so many audiences to be won with documentary. I mean, maybe we're an event, so that's the strength of IDFA. I mean, we have incredibly loyal audiences. I'm not sure why they come to IDFA, but they come every year, and more are flocking towards us. And like from 15 years ago, they would just only come because they would read just a one-liner, you know, it's an old farmer in the Ukraine or something, and then they would go see a film. Of course, now we have some longer text. But so we put our audiences on a pedestal a lot. And,
yeah, you should.
We're so happy with them. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think we move on and let's go overseas, all the way to the Rocky Mountains, Park City, Utah. Sundance Film Festival, one of the coolest festivals, and you have a program to die for.
It's pretty good.
Go ahead, Hussein. Tell us.
So you've all heard of Sundance, right? Right. Good. So it is actually part of a Sundance Institute, which began about 30 years ago, under the co-founding partner was Robert Redford, of course, who's an actor and a director and a writer, and who saw there wasn't enough of a place, a platform to launch independent film in the US. And the Institute was a place that came up to be because they wanted to nurture artists and nurture writers to hone their talent, to meet each other. Because I mean, back in the 70s, there wasn't really a lot going on when it came to networking. And from the Institute grew the festival. And the festival has now become the most public-facing part of the Institute. But we still also have things like the DFP, the doc film program. It has $1.5 to $2 million a year that we give to docs in production or about to finish production or in post. We have artist services to help you get your film out there in the world when it's finished. We have writers' workshops, we have theater workshops, composers, craft workshops for cinematography, editing. So when you're into the Institute, we help you through the entire process, which is part of the goal and the mission of the Institute, is to get people to be making higher quality films, to get their personal voice heard. And at times there's so many pressures, like we talked about pressure earlier, the pressure of trying to make money or trying to appease this party or that party. But what's really important is what the artist has to say. And that's a reflection of his or her journey, his or her culture, his or her society that they're from. And it's so easy to lose that in the media. And the festival has been a place where you can discover new talent, where you can find crazy wild stories, where you can have a great time, and the odds of seeing a great film are really quite high at the festival. We take it very, very seriously, of course, as we all do. But the doc program is about 40 or so docs. So we get 12,000 submissions a year, roughly. Out of that is about 120 or so films get selected. Out of that, about 35 to 40 docs that go into the US doc competition, the international doc competition, New Frontier, and Premiere, the Premiere section as well. Also, there's a section for children as well. But it's spread across those sections. And the one that I love the most, that I've just recently kind of had a bit of a crush on, is called New Frontier, which is a place that is in some ways similar to what you do at IDFA, where we try to expand the meaning of what documentary is, to broaden the definition of how you engage with docs and what nonfiction is. And we have installations, we have things you would normally find in a gallery. We use interactive docs on iPads or computers. The best one we had was a couple years ago from a lady called, oh God, I forgot her name now. Her film was called Coral. It was shown in a tent, a 3D tent. You walk in, there's pillows, blankets, you lie down, you look up. And they project these wonderful images of coral off the east coast of Australia.
Wow.
in their mating time. And the imagery is incredible. It's all shot with really high def cameras underwater, things you've never seen before, with an incredible soundtrack. That was, to me, I tweeted about it saying it was like Attenborough and Picasso got drunk and had a baby. It was that kind of art to me. So you're kind of covered across bases if you want experimental documentary or things that push the boundaries, or traditional wonderful storytelling in docs.
You want to, when it comes to the World Cinema Documentary Competition, how many films do you have in that competition?
Like 10 to 12.
10 to 12.
Depends on who's asking. No, just kidding. No, it's yeah, that's a hard one because there's so much out there. In the last few years, we've seen some doc festivals emerging. Doc filmmaking is the most exciting, I think, of a lot of film, because of docs have certain freedoms in how they make films, in how they fund films, and how they distribute films. And in a lot of ways, docs are the ones who are pushing the boundaries on how we get our films out there. You have to be very creative as a producer as to how you get your film made as a documentary filmmaker. And that's incredible for us. We get things that you wouldn't otherwise see anywhere else. And from that selection, I've actually picked one of the winners from that doc competition in the slides, in the clips. Do you want to see it? Yeah.
Shall we show?
Should we look at?
Let's go for the clips.
Okay, so before we go, I'll just say that's kind of the uniting link through all of them is character. So I think it's quite a talent to be a doc director and to spot a character that's going to sustain a film's duration, that's going to make the audience connect, that's going to be cinematic, that's going to be cool, it's going to be interesting. And these films have just great characters. Other things too, but that's the sole thing that I found was that pinned all of us to the wall when we saw it. So check it out.
Thanks.
So I just love these movies. That's reason why I put these on for you. I love them. I've seen them a million times. They're going to be watched for ages to come. But what I really liked about these, that also chimes with what I was saying earlier about artists, is, do you know what these films are about? Have you guys seen these films? Any of these films you've seen at all? Yeah? Yeah. You have, yeah. They're about like artists becoming themselves, the process of turning into an artist. And the Nick Cave film did it fantastic. It did a fantastic job of that. They did it in a way where Nick Cave said in one of his Q&As, I wasn't like these guys come into my life and film me waking up next to my wife in the morning. That's one of the most personal things you can ever have. I'm not giving that to an audience, I'm not giving that to these directors. But at the same time, he allowed them to recreate it. And by doing that, you get to an emotional truth as to showing something in reality. You get something perhaps in some ways deeper, I think. And they did it by, which I loved also, it was very cinematic, these films, is they used every single part of the frame. It wasn't like there was everything wild about waving the camera about. Every part of this frame was thought about and contemplated, and there for a reason, for structure, for aesthetic, for a feeling that it shares with the audience. And it's proven itself. It's traveled all over the world. It's done very, very well. Even, I'm not even a Nick Cave fan. My wife is. No one's perfect. But even I was glued to this movie, you know? And what I want, when people ask me, what do you want for docs? I want docs that are going to leave the festivals and go out there and be in cinemas. And people are going to buy tickets to it and buy the DVD and watch on Netflix. I want you to watch docs like you watch regular films. I want it to be fun. I want it to be cool. I want it to be engaging. I want it to be powerful and emotional. But I want it to be, to leave festivals and have a whole life of its own. And lots of docs that we have screened have done that. They've been able to go out there and march around the world. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that what I said before about, you know, Gothenburg being a problem with Berlin, actually Sundance is not a problem. So 20,000 Days on Earth went from Sundance to Berlin, had its European premiere in Berlin. So that is, and even some European films, because that was a UK film. So, you know, for us, that was totally okay to screen it after Sundance. So, you know.
And also the beautiful film about Kurt Cobain, the Montage of Heck.
Montage of Heck. Yeah, the Kurt Cobain film for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, these ones especially, like the reason why I picked these films also was because you've got Morgan Neville, who won an Oscar for that film a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago. He's someone who's mastered structure. He's got the from Stardom. He's kind of mastered structure. He's got it. You're on with him for the whole ride. Then you got Crystal Moselle, who made The Wolf Pack. You heard of this film? So this is like 8 kids, who are locked in their apartment thanks to their father. They hardly ever leave the apartment, and they've been living there for years and years and years. And the only way out, the way of escape, is to dress up and to recreate their favorite films, like Reservoir Dogs, which came from Sundance, Pulp Fiction, these great classic films that they kind of reenact together, and they kind of film themselves making these movies. And it's just mind-blowing this actually exists. And this director found these kids on the street, got chatting to them, and entered their lives and made this amazing film about them. She's a first-time director. Morgan's an established director. And Ian and Jane, who made the Nick Cave film, are actually visual artists who made this. So that's to us is very exciting to have people who are from such different backgrounds and not really that much experience in making docs make such incredible movies.
Fantastic. Concerning the Wolf Pack, where are they based? In New York or?
They're in New York City, yeah. They're, I think, in Manhattan, like in a flat in Manhattan. And Crystal was saying that she knows her neighborhood very, very well.
Yeah.
Lived there almost her whole life. And you walk down the street and see these like 8 kids walking at you with long hair and the black. And like, I've not seen you around here before. Who are you guys? And so began this incredible story into their flat. I mean, it's kind of, you have to see it to believe it. But to live like that in New York City is almost impossible, to be trapped like that for so long.
And the father, is he also in the film? I haven't seen it.
He's in the film.
Yeah.
He's in there, and yeah, he does raise some questions. You gotta wonder what this guy's up to. And this year at the festival, we had a lot of films about. We had one about Scientology, and we had one about, I forget what it's called. It's about another cult that was happening in Utah, actually, a religious cult. And this guy kind of reminded me of he was that kind of power monger. And we're always concerned with power structures and how power affects people. And this was a great, minute, very small way of exploring that through youth, through childhood, through I mean, the tragedy of being held down like that by your parents, but to come out the other side and having art be your savior in some ways is kind of magical, I think.
Thanks, great. I think we're gonna head towards the Swedish documentaries now, and your thought about what do you think about their strengths, weaknesses. Yeah, the floor is all yours.
I can basically confirm what's the story with the fiction. There's a great variation. Last year we had, I think, 9 Swedish films at IDFA, and 6 were in different program sections. So in the Paradox section, which is an experimental section, Kids and Dogs, Best of Fests, mid-length competition. So you can see even in length, in the fact that there are new filmmakers out there, that's really nice to see. And there's been a steady number of films, between 5 and 15 at IDFA for the last 5 years. I've checked the figures. So, I mean, I think it's a steady production and with a high production value too. Sometimes they can be a bit more brave and bold. So hopefully you'll sort of
brave and bold.
follow up on
Anyone?
that. Or crazy, or a bit more rough maybe.
Edgy,
daring. Go out your comfort zone sometimes. But what I really like about it is the fact that it's a very international subject matter. So you go out into the world, which is great. So, I mean, for our audiences, it works really well.
Yeah.
I agree. I like the way Swedish docs do think internationally. They're not just aiming at, you know, one small, tiny audience, which is, you know, fine. But in Swedish films that I've seen that have come to Sundance, they've managed to walk the balance of being an international topic and being artistic, like Black Power Mixtape, like what's the last one he made?
Concerning Violence.
Concerning Violence. That just knocked me out, that movie. I was blown away. I didn't know much about Frans Fanon's writings or his work, and to have that perfect cocktail of the imagery and the music and the voiceover from Lauryn Hill and the message at that time was amazing, and I hadn't seen that anywhere else. But for us, Swedish films are known to be really high quality looking. At least they're going to look great in the cinema and feel great in the cinema. They're going to be quirky and a dark sense of humor.
Oh,
I've noticed.
Really?
People have quite a sense of humor, which I do look forward to tasting once in a while. Once in a while.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a great tradition in Swedish documentaries for these engaged films. Taking the side of the underdogs has been Swedish filmmakers' passion since, I think, the 1960s, as we can see in the films by Hugo-Göran Olsson, because he's using a lot of old footage that was produced by Swedish filmmakers. So you can see the tradition in there, which I found quite interesting. You also have a great tradition of political documentaries. So Swedish filmmakers try to show what's wrong in the world. Sometimes I have a feeling they're showing too much what's wrong elsewhere, and sometimes I would like to see more about Sweden. I mean, there must be some things that are not quite right.
One is coming up very soon.
Thank you. No, but I think sometimes I wish that you would also look to your own country and tell us more about that, because we're quite curious to find out more. Sometimes that's my personal peeve, because I understand Swedish quite well, so I don't just read the subtitles, and there's this very Swedish type of voiceover that I find very old-fashioned and a bit boring. It's this kind of authoritative, kind of we explain the world to you type thing. And even innovative, kind of hip, young filmmakers end up doing that. I don't know why that is. I don't know if your kind of funders say at some point, oh, you need this, otherwise nobody will understand the film. So that's my kind of main concern. I sometimes feel, as Martijn said, there is the, you know, playing safe. It's like sometimes you're missing the rough edges, and sometimes I'm getting more answers than questions from Swedish films. So I also encourage you to be kind of more open, try out things, be crazy, go bold, go all the way. I mean, some of the films that we had at Panorama that I really liked, because they were not quite as the usual Swedish films. I mean, we had Belleville Baby, which I liked very much.
Yeah, fantastic.
Fantastic film. With the films by Hugo-Göran Olsson were, you know, using some of the elements of traditional Swedish film, but doing something new with them. And we also had TPB AFK, the Pirate Bay Away from Keyboard.
Right, yeah,
so that was also trying to go in a different direction. So I think, you know, like in Denmark, through their new talent development, they have really been trying to encourage everybody to kind of do new and wild things, and combining different genres and everything. And I think Sweden could experiment a bit more. So if any of the documentary commissioners are here, I also encourage you to take on more exciting subjects.
Thank you. Perfect. I'm just curious, because you are here, both mixed festivals and documentary festivals. Are there docs that fit better a mixed festival than a doc-only festival? Would you say that? Are there, or not?
I could start, because sometimes when my colleague and we do the pre-selection with many films, we say this is really interesting, this is a film that really should be seen, but it would work better in a docs-only festival, because in a big festival like Berlinale and the panorama section, it will just get kind of trampled down by so many other things. So you need a certain kind of pushing power. So some of the kind of not so maybe it's the wrong word, but they're not so loud films might fare, you know, have a harder time in a general festival where they're also competing with the fictions, where they're also competing with the red carpet, where they're also competing with all of that, whereas a documentary-only festival can build more of these and also take on documentaries that are dealing with more complex subjects, which a general film festival that also screens documentaries sometimes finds more difficult. But you know, we have sections at Berlinale, like the forum section and also forum expanded, that are really trying to work on that. But you know, for looking for panorama, there's a lot of films where we feel either they would be better at the forum or in a documentary only festival, because they could do more for the film.
Okay.
It depends. Sorry, I made just one comment. It depends. It's a really good question, but it's quite hard, because I know, having come from a doc-only festival and having, shall we say, smaller docs, that I know if they had gone to like London Film Festival, for example, or something like that, they would not have been given that much coverage. But the Guardian would come up to DocFest and would look at these smaller films and write about it in their film pages. It got great coverage. Yeah. At the same time, the Moo Man, remember that film Moo Man? No. About the British farmer and his cow? Ay, ay, ay. So it's a small film. It's kind of a love story almost between this guy and his cow and this industry he has. It's like, she's a really old cow and everything. He's done this work for years and years, and it's a small movie. It's in Sundance with the red carpets, with all the competition and everything else. But people were generally really like surprised by it, and they had a moment with this film. They weren't taken aback by a movie star or by an explosion or whatever. It was like, wow, this is a really quiet, beautiful moment I'm having with this film. So it can work kind of both ways. It depends on what your whole program is in the end. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Okay. So, good question, but I gotta...
Did he bring the cow?
Sorry?
Did he bring the cow?
Well, no, because it died in the end.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Spoiler alert.
People were in tears. People were in tears. The cow died.
Did they bring the ham?
To the party afterwards. Yeah.
But I agree to Circa. Even it was not the holy grail. Other films are there are smaller documentary festivals, and you can premiere there, and it might be working better, you know, if a film just is a slow burner and go from festival to festival and maybe win prizes at smaller festivals. Yeah. So it could be even better for a film. There's many other festivals as well, so we're not the only one.
Really? I was just, when I looked through your clips, I realized that the majority of them were music docs, and it was just an article in the Swedish newspaper on last Friday, and they were just talking about its genre, saying it's becoming wider, more creative, and less stereotype. Do you agree with that? Can you see some kind of trend when it comes to the music docs, or?
I've been going to South by Southwest, which is in March in Austin, Texas, which originally was a music festival, but now it's very much an interactive and a film festival as well. And I can say that it's right, it's correct, but it's not like a total revolution. I mean, there's still a lot of conventional music films, and some of them even are executively produced by the people in the film, or the family, or the people that have an interest in the film, which are often not very interesting, those films. So I would say the more independent films are more interesting, but there are like more and more creative documentaries, music documentaries as well, screening, and they're also programmed at more festivals, so I can confirm that. I mean, we've been doing this music section for about 5 years now. First it was a competition, now it's no longer a competition, but we have an extra audience award, because it was quite problematic to have a competition of music films, because many of them were quite conventional at that time. But last year we screened about 3, 4, 5 films even that were quite experimental and weird and great, and new and fresh, and also from music very unknown to us. I mean, from the inlands of Brazil, or the crazy experimental music in Poland, you know. So I can confirm it, but it's not like a total revolution. But it's gone more popular, and I'm happy about it. You get new audiences, and you get crossover screenings with music after the film, and it works really well with us. I mean, in the weekend, or the first weekend of IDFA, we have about 2,000 to 3,000 people seeing 8 films altogether with a band and music afterwards, and it works so well. I mean, people are so happy seeing when they've seen the film, and then the artists come on, and you have a Q&A, maybe even short, and then music. You know, it's just amazing.
You know, Albert Maysles, who passed away this year. He died, I think. Was it this year? And he came to a festival I used to work at in England for a couple of years. He was there, and he was like, we gave him an award, and he came on the stage, and he was, you know, he's like 80 something, you know, but making docs forever, and he's like, try to make your films about good people in the world, and about, like, don't keep talking about the horrible things in the world. Talk about nice things, good people. They're doing good things that are making our world a better place. And I think music docs sometimes can fulfill that function in some way. It isn't always about political implosions and power struggles and whatnot. And people connect with that sometimes. It's like a lot of Hollywood films are always made on another film, or made on a book, or made on something. They're always based on something. And a doc like that, that's based on a musical group or a musical act or even a song, can be great. People, it's a fast track into their youth or their memory or something like that, which tends to work very, very well. I think that's why there's so many of them, but it isn't a revolution as such. There's a site now in the UK called Music Film Web, dedicated to hosting and sharing and giving a profile to music documentaries. I mean, it's like, really? There's that many of them now where there's a site where you can go get them. People will root it out and find the lost footage of their favorite band or whatever else. But you're right, it's blooming, and I love it.
Yeah. Well, I feel there seem to be, like, with music documentary, it's even, you know, a lot of directors go for the known names because it's probably easier to finance, because if they go for crowdfunding, it's easier to get money for a film about Elvis than about a very little known Swedish singer-songwriter. So a lot of the stuff that we get to see, that you never get to see because we actually decide that it's not good enough to share with anybody, are these super conventional films about bands that we've seen 1,000 times, and it's like, what more can you say about the Grateful Dead that has not been said yet? And, you know, a lot of these are kind of, you know, the filmmakers forget anything they might have ever learned or known about dramaturgy or anything. They think chronology is what rules with music docs. Like, you talk about a band, you talk about how they met in primary school, and, you know, somebody takes coke, somebody falls off the stage. We have all this great unseen footage, which is normally amateurs shooting something really badly. So unseen footage is not always kind of, sometimes it has been unseen for a reason. So, you know, a lot of this, I'm very happy about a new trend, and that is making innovative, interesting music documentaries about well-known, like, you know, 20,000 Days on Earth. That's a really good example, because, you know, Nick Cave has had his share of documentaries. There have been many films made about him, but this is like, okay, it's making a film about a figure that everybody knows and everybody has some opinion, but manages to show him in a different way. So this is stuff that I'm very happy about. Sometimes I'm quite sad because there's beautiful films about completely unknown bands, and that's why I brought Sume, because I wanted you to discover it, because that, even though it premiered in Berlin and we were hoping that it would really go out into the world, has not, because it's like, oh my God, it's Greenland, and nobody knows Greenland, and where is the country at all, and they're talking about post-colonial questions. So I think, you know, music is a good way to transport other messages as well. And yeah, there is like a yes and no about it, and there's, you know, there's some very well-known filmmakers that will work in fiction and then they make a film about a band because it's like a safe thing and they know the box office will come because there's enough fans. I mean, there's a German film about the Scorpions, which is like the kind of chronology, boring, beautifully, you know, nicely shot, high production value, but as a film, it's like not going to do anything to change your life.
Maybe we should start with some questions from the audience. Are you ready? Anyone?
I have some prizes. If you ask a really good question,
you will dance for us, or?
It ain't that good a prize.
No.
I'll give you one.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
I'll give you one.
I like his attitude.
Yeah.
Hopefully. And I'd like to include Nicky and Elena in this question as well. I think, is it 12 or 15 years ago, when Michael Moore's film on Columbine was shown in competition in Cannes, and it got the major prize as well. This year in Cannes, for the first time, they had a prize for documentaries, l'or, the Golden Eye, finally. And I wonder what you think, should more documentaries be introduced into the major competitions, or should we have on equal terms, or should they be presented separately, documentaries on one side and fiction films on the other? Yeah.
Stig, I'm gonna jump in. I just need to talk again, otherwise I'll fall asleep. So, out of my own experience, I run a rather small festival in Germany. It's dedicated to film editing. So we only invite editors. And from the beginning, it was clear for me the achievement of editing in documentaries is even bigger than in fiction films. I don't need to tell you, some directors shoot 500 hours. They go to the editor and said, okay, do me a rough cut. I'll be back in 2 months. So back then, starting it out, we said from the beginning on, we don't want to do this classical compare apple to a grapefruit or whatever. We want to have it equally. So we said, if we're gonna do documentary and feature films, only on the same base. So we have an award money, for example, for 7,500 euros. We have 5 slots. We have a jury. So it's, you know, like for both things. So I'm very much for equality, let's say, in this kind of question, talking about documentary and fiction films, because we all know how much effort it takes to do a documentary. And I'm very often afraid that if you put only 1 or 2 documentaries into a competition that is otherwise completely full with fiction films, they get lost a little bit. I think that's also why our colleagues are let me finish. So I think like it would be really great to have, you know, like this kind of both issues on the same level in the big festivals. But this is maybe a way we are, you know, like slowly developing too. Otherwise, I know that a lot of jurors are having an issue when they have to judge fiction film and documentaries, and they feel like in an peculiar position, you know, like not knowing how to judge, you know, fiction and documentaries.
This time I grabbed the mic myself, because I also think it's a crucial question. And sometimes also what we've all been saying is that film somehow moves quite fast. I think they change quite rapidly. And sometimes actually big festivals, which are also big institutions or cultural institutions, move actually much slower than the films they screen. So that's, for example, the case with Venice, which is the oldest festival in the world, 72 years. Well, it was only recently, in fact, that the competition was open to both documentary and feature films. It takes really a lot of discussion. It's not a simple decision to be taken. And for the first time, it was, in fact, 2 years ago that a documentary film won the Venice Film Festival, the Sacro Gra, by Gianfranco Rosi. And the same, it happened, it started the previous year with the documentary I just mentioned, the Chinese documentary By One Bing. That was the first time that the Orizzonti section allowed to have the same prize. Basically, the prize was somehow the same. It was not divided. There was not a special documentary prize as it had been until the previous year. But again, this kind of decision for big institutions or cultural institutions imply a much longer and slower discussion than what we might think. So, and again, it's the film that pushed the decision. It's not the institution that decides. So I think it's actually thanks to documentary films that have been made in this, as Martin was saying, in these last 10 years, how they've become so prominent that they've finally managed to change these kind of big and static institutions.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that, you know, this year in Berlinale, in the competition, there was a film by Patricio Guzman, which was the only documentary competition. Yeah, but is it a documentary? Yes, it is a documentary, and funnily enough, it won the award for the best script, which was the Silver Bear. But you know, then we're talking about what is a documentary and what isn't a documentary. What I wanted to mention, because I found your question quite interesting, and there's another movement from the other side. There's a traditional documentary festival in France, the Film Marseille, and 4 years ago they've renamed their festival. They now call it Festival of Cinema. They dropped in the festival title the reference to documentary, and they've opened a festival for fiction films, which is, you know, like, why should only the fiction festivals open for documentary films? Why shouldn't it be the other way around? So I think it's nice that if you look at films as they're films and they should be seen in the context. I'm sometimes really sad when I see fiction filmmakers, as soon as they make their first documentary, they forget everything they ever learned about storytelling or anything, and they think like, oh, talking heads, it's a doc, it has to be like that. No, it isn't. I think we could all benefit from being more in contact. But of course it's difficult to compare a film about, you know, telling about, you know, because a lot of documentaries are trying to raise the important questions about life and then compare that to a light romantic comedy. So I can agree that for a jury it's difficult to kind of place that, especially if out of, you know, 12 or 15 films there's only one documentary, and if you want to kind of if you know, you have no other documentaries to compare that to. So you know, it's a very valid question, but probably not so easy to answer right away.
Another question?
Well, I had a question. Documentaries and feature films, but do you ever consider a film that is both documentary and feature?
Like a hybrid, or?
Yeah, whatever you call it.
We do.
Yeah, thank you. Because it's, you know, because a lot of films or whatever it is, you should do it like this or like this, but you have the artistic thing into it. But I think it's very interesting because people are like doing films more like crossing borders in every level.
I think all of the festivals here are not pigeonholing films, you know, put them in a little box or a ghetto, and we shouldn't. It's cinema in the broader sense, and that's how we feel, and we need to really get across. We also did a program on hybrid films 2 years ago, and this year we will do a theme program on sound design, for example. A huge program to research the creative ways of using sound and sound design for documentaries. So maybe if you have something very special here, let me know, and I'll connect you to the right person within IDFA. So maybe that's giving a little bit of an answer. But it's also in other sections, in competitions, in Paradox, we will have films that are hybrids.
Yeah, I mean, the Paradox section is fantastic. You always get a surprise there. You get knocked up by something where you never know quite where you are in the film. You never know where it's going to lead. You never know what the arc's going to be, which is terribly exciting. We also embrace wherever we can hybrid docs. What's fiction? What's narrative? We can go on that discussion forever. But what New Frontier represents at Sundance is the meeting of technology and storytelling, and the way artists are embracing all kinds of crazy technology that is so exciting. It's like it's almost like the person and the machine are becoming one in some of these films. It's incredible. And there are places where I really hope sometimes that fiction filmmakers or traditional filmmakers can take a little bit of that to spice up their films with, and vice versa. But it is kept like it's an animal. My God, kept
in a cave.
It is, yeah. It's kept. It's exhibited in a separate place. You can't be shown in cinemas often. Some of these projects and these works. So we have to coerce people to come in and to experiment and to take a chance and see some of these things. And I guarantee you will look at the next film in a whole different way.
But I mean, the venue for New Frontier in Park City, it's right in the middle, right? Or yeah, so it's not
it's right
difficult.
In the middle of downtown. It's
yeah,
free to get
like,
into.
Yeah.
It's
oh,
huge.
It's free.
It's
okay.
free.
Yeah.
It's got 3 levels now, I think. And the bottom level, we have interviews with filmmakers. We have a lounge. But that to me is where I'm looking at as well for the crossover between nonfiction and technology and art.
I think it's also, from what I sense from your question, is that, of course, if you try to finance a film, for any financer, producer, funding agent, or if you go to television, for them it's easier to know what they have. If you come and say, I have something that's a bit of this and a bit of that, they don't know which box to tick. So I can see that for filmmakers who want to work between the genres, it can be more difficult to make it, because you encounter other obstacles than you have in a traditionally told documentary. But I encourage everybody to do it, and maybe by convince as well television as other funders, by just if you all want to make these films, they realize that maybe they should change as well.
Yeah, I think, is it time for one more question, or yeah, sure. Anyone else? Oh, surprise.
He has 2 prizes, awards, for good questions. He's awarding the audience.
I have a technical question, if I may ask. Could I just hear her question first? Okay, sorry. She had a question. Oh,
It's not a good question. No, I just wondering, like, if you're ever like afraid of showing like films that you really like, but you don't know if they're like too something to be shown. If you've been in that position.
We had this chat last night, didn't we? Too afraid of showing. Well, no. There's films where you wonder, am I nuts or is this genius? Is this amazing or is it rubbish? I don't know. You have that discussion all the time. But not to be
We're afraid for the people making the film.
Oh, well, yeah.
Those animals, my God.
Yeah, I mean, oh God, there was one. I mean, there's so many examples, but I'll tell you, like, I mean, Russian Woodpecker, Cartel Land. Yeah, exactly. There's of course there's concerns, and in fact, when we had the screening of Going Clear at Sundance this year, we had security guards in the cinema, and we had protection. We had
Just tell us a little bit. I mean, for the audience who doesn't know, Go Clear.
So Going Clear is the doc by Alex Gibney, Oscar winner Alex Gibney, about a guy who left the Church of Scientology and has been writing about his experiences and talking to the media and trying to get the truth about what this religion does to people. And of course you're worried about this guy because you've seen other films. I've seen one from Channel 4 a few years ago where people are, get harassed by other members of the church. When I was in Sheffield, we had a film about Scientology where the Scientologists bought lots of the tickets in the cinema so no one could come and see the film. They didn't show up in the end, but we had to prepare for it. Yeah, there's concerns, there's fear, but we would never not show. I mean, we would never not show a film because if it's politically incorrect or that kind of thing. But yeah, there are people behind the camera. There's people in front of the camera. You are concerned, and that's a really tough moral discussion you have with yourself or with the other programmers. I don't know how you guys handle this.
In the past, we've had some films where we had to anonymize the directors, so they're not listed anywhere. And for example, Return to Homs was, of course, an incredible film of Syria, on the situation in Syria.
Burma VJ as well.
Sorry?
Burma VJ.
Burma VJ a while ago, yeah, of course.
Anonymous in the credits for hours.
Yep, an act of killing.
Has there been anything on the abortion movement in America?
you know, they're fighting about the free abortion, for example.
There's been a few films about abortion. The best one we showed was a couple years ago was After Tiller.
Enormously
Sorry, say it again.
trigger from the people who are against it, enormously violent movement, no?
Like enormously violent, but there have been some incidents, yeah, where they've hurt people a couple of times, yeah. Yeah, there was Heidi Ewing's film, 12th in Delaware, from a few years back. That was one of the more balanced investigations into the abortion debate that I've seen for a long time. The most recent one was After Tiller, which does talk about one of the most horrible incidents of when one of the last doctors to do late-term abortion in the United States was assassinated, like in church, by these extremists. And that film was fantastic. It was very, very sensitive, very, very subtle, and talked about the complexities of what parents have to go through, the torment that they have to go through to make this choice. And there aren't enough films made about it, I have to say. But when they come along like that, it does stir incredible debate with the media, and it does have the power to actually change laws if it's done right. Why do you ask? Why is that?
Because I'm following the movement.
Oh, Vessel. Amazing film. Yeah, made by a Dutch director, though. Yeah. You've seen Vessel? Gotta see Vessel. It's about a boat that goes around to countries that don't allow.
So it was actually screening here at Filmrummet, and it was like a smoke bomb was thrown into the screening.
Really?
That's
Here?
Yeah.
In December.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. They had an incident. Didn't they? They had an incident. Didn't they? So what? So that
was stopped by a smoke bomb.
Wow.
Can you tell us what happened? Can we hear a microphone? I want to hear this.
It was a hello. Yeah, it was a. It was a little festival here in Stockholm, and the screening was actually stopped because of a smoke bomb, and then we screened it again in Gothenburg. So
what was that screening?
That screening was okay, but the screening here in Stockholm was stopped by this of security reason.
Yeah, that was actually, I was wrong. It was actually an American filmmaker, Diane Whitten, made that film, correct? About a Dutch doctor, right?
I'm sorry, I think we have to wrap up because we are...
Oh, it's 12 o'clock.
Yeah. Sorry, it's been... So, thank you, all
Great question.
Wonderful people. Please come up on stage.